Morning, members, and welcome to the November Lochaber Area Committee meeting. Please note that this is a formal public Highland Council meeting and is being recorded and will be uploaded for public access via the Council's YouTube site. You are therefore reminded not to make specific references to individuals and to only disclose information which is in the public domain. I also remind members that the chat function is to be used only for placing motions and amendments. Members participating remotely should activate the hand button when wishing to speak. This function will be monitored. Thank you. So but before we start, I would like to welcome our new councillor for Ward 11, Councillor Sammy Cameron, and congratulations on your recent result in the by-election, and we look forward to working with you. So congratulations. And I'd also like to thank Councillor or ex-Councillor Fanny, who was one of our Ward 12 councillors, who has now left us. And I'd just like to thank her very much for all the hard work she's done over the last 3.5 years. I've certainly enjoyed working with Sarah, and I'm sure the rest of us have too. I think Sarah will be very, very sadly missed, and just on behalf of all of us, wish her the best with her future ventures in France. So thanks again, Sarah. So moving on, we don't have any apologies. And does anyone have a declaration of interest? No. So I would like to declare an interest. I've made a declaration of interest for item 12, the notice of motion. I have a close family member who works for Moe, and because of that, I will be leaving the room for the item, and the Vice Chair, Councillor Grafton, will be taking over the meeting for item 12. Thank you. So moving on to item 3, which is an update, a police report update, and welcome to Inspector Katie Duncan, who has joined us in the room, and thank you for coming along. I will hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, everybody. I'm Katie Duncan. I am now the full-time inspector in Lochaber, based at Fort William Police Station. I promoted in post in August this year, and I'm looking forward to working in the post for quite some time. So thank you for the opportunity to present the latest area committee report from Police Scotland. As you'll see from the report, the figures include statistics from Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch, Strathspey and Nairn. I'll go through some of the key aspects of the report, and will of course be happy to take any questions you have following this. So firstly, in relation to road safety and road crime, there has been an increase of 6 to 9 fatalities on our roads within the South Highland area compared with the same period last year. You'll all be aware of the extremely tragic triple fatal accident in August this year out on the A830, which the town is still reeling from this incident, which has obviously contributed to the statistics as well. As a result of that, we did have young driver engagement sessions and inputs to young drivers and also driving instructors. That was ongoing prior to this accident, but following this accident, officers in the roads policing unit who are based at Fort William have been in contact with all the driving instructors in the area and put invitations out on social media for interest in this, and there's been a huge uptake, which I'm pleased to see. So those inputs are ongoing just now, and we'll continue doing that as well. I think its education is extremely important with regards to fatalities on the roads. A number of the fatalities as well have been due to drivers who've perhaps been used to driving on the right-hand side of the road as well. There's been an element of confusion. We do have a dedicated roads policing unit based at Fort William. We've got a sergeant and 7 police officers within that department at this time, with possibly more officers going in there. So we do have a committed department that are absolutely committed to road safety and education. As you'll see, there's a number of speeding and drink driving offences which have increased over the period, which shows our commitment to dealing with road traffic offenders and reducing the deaths on the roads. The numbers have increased, but that's due to proactive work by our roads policing and our local policing officers as well. In relation to antisocial behaviour, disorder and violence, you will see that there has been an increase in assaults and antisocial behaviour. This is largely down to issues with groups of youth in the Nairn and Fort William area several months ago who were responsible for numerous incidents of antisocial behaviour. I am pleased to report that owing to significant targeting of these issues, various youths have been dealt with, reported to Children's Reports or joint reports to the Fiscal, and we have got ongoing work with our partner agencies as well. And the actual number of incidents occurring within the last few months we have seen a reduction of that. You will see that serious assaults have reduced significantly over the period and that the detection rate is high, which is welcome news. I am pleased to be able to report that the number of drugs possession cases have increased significantly over this period. I would say that a lot of this is down to proactive work of police officers in the area. It has been a cause of frustration to me, largely through a lack of sufficient intelligence and having to focus resources elsewhere, that we've often struggled in this area previously. I can report, however, that there has been a promising increase over the last few months, and I hope the foundations are in place for this to continue moving forward. In relation to acquisitive crime, on the whole, this remains relatively stable, with the exception of frauds, which appears to be following a national trend, unfortunately, with an increase showing there. With regards to protecting vulnerable people in our communities, you will see the number of crimes being dealt with in this regard, as well as the hugely time-consuming missing person inquiries. They've all increased. We do deal with a significant amount of missing people. In the Lochaber area, we get a lot of missing people that come up from other areas, albeit whether that's in Scotland or out with from England. We deal with high-risk missing persons. Is quite a regular piece of work that we deal with, and the amount of resources that are dedicated to those incidents it is significant. So that takes up a lot of our resourcing when we've got those incidents ongoing. Hate crime is increasing, probably due to a number of factors. The police are encouraging vulnerable people and groups to report these types of crimes. But there's also a likelihood that the increase is due to current issues around the globe just now, which is having an impact on the increase in this crime type. At this time, it's unclear why the number of domestic crimes have increased in South Highland. The increase of 57 appears to be a result of an increase in instances right across South Highland. I am absolutely committed to dealing with crimes of domestic assault, domestic abuse, and the expectation on all the staff in the Lochaber policing area is that every domestic incident will be dealt with appropriately and properly, with their main focus on the well-being and welfare of the victims of all crimes of domestic abuse. So that's a sort of very quick resume of the report that we've produced, and I would welcome any questions from anybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you for the report. Councillor Grafton.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kate, for the report. A comment first. I think Sarah would have identified this one. The rate numbers, the fact that they've actually remained the same, and you've got a detection rate of nearly 50%, which that sounds really good. Again, you mentioned the hate crime quite clearly. I suppose I'm wondering, you've got 22.4% detection rate. Is there something about particular problems with that means they're more difficult to detect or to find out?
With hate crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are completely committed to dealing with hate crimes. We've got a zero tolerance approach towards any crimes, hate crimes, and we ensure the welfare and well-being of the victims, which is an ongoing process. We check in afterwards, after reports been made to us, make sure support is in place, and we signpost the victims to that. With regards to detection rates, I think hate crimes can encompass a wide range of incidents. It's probably quite difficult to say why some crimes are solved as opposed to others. We can, as with everything, we're dealing with the evidence that's presented to us. So it's difficult to sort of explain why some crimes are solved and why some aren't. It would be down to lack of evidence would be our main reason why a crime isn't solved. But a crime, if it hasn't been solved, it will remain live, and we can investigate if further information comes to light.
Thank you very much. Two more, please. It's quite a current issue at the moment. There's potentially going to be an influx of asylum seekers into the Highland area. We've talked about this a lot in council, amongst councillors, and there's questions about the stress on the health service, on doctors. So I'm asking the obvious question, excuse me, do you imagine that could cause a stress on the policing of Lochaber?
We have no intelligence or information that any asylum seekers are coming to this area, so I don't anticipate any input, any more stress placed on operational officers in Lochaber at this time, and we've certainly not been asked to assist our colleagues in Inverness either. So as far as I know, it's business as usual for us here, and that won't impact us.
Thank you. And the last one, I don't know whether you've seen, just show you that one. Apparently it's in Inverness. There's a current issue with ring a go signs on parking meters, where people are asked to ring a number, but actually it's not Highland Council parking, it goes to some other organisation, presumably fraud. That concerns me quite a lot. I used several car parks. I was in the Forest car park on the Glen Nevis Road the other day, and I looked at it and I thought, how do I tell as an ordinary individual what's a false sign and what's a real sign? And I suppose I'm also wondering how many people have already been caught out by this. So I'm just raising the issue. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm not aware of any issues being reported to us with regards to that in Lochaber. I don't know if our colleagues are having reports elsewhere. I would suggest probably the first port of call would be with Highland Council as opposed to ourselves, but we've had no sort of reports of fraudulent schemes with regards to that here.
Okay, lovely. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, John. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Inspector. It's lovely to see you back in Fort William and be able to refer to you as Inspector rather than Acting Inspector. It's lovely to have you back looking after policing in Lochaber. I'd like to focus on your comments that you made about antisocial behaviour and vandalism. You will know, I'm sure, from the briefing that you had from your predecessor that this had particularly exercised councillors and others at the beginning of the year when we saw an acute amount of vandalism in and around the town centre that had spread to other areas. So it is good to see, to hear about the focused efforts that you've put into dealing with what you acknowledged, I think, is a relatively small number of individuals that have caused a disproportionate amount of work. And I guess the test now will be whether the Children's Panel and the Procurator Fiscal take robust action, and that's forms part of a deterrent for others behaving in that way. But I guess my point is the issue hasn't gone away. So we've had recent vandalism against a few Forth public toilets, which means that they have been closed again. And then there were reports in the regional media towards the end of last week that vandalism across the Highlands has cost the council £100,000 a year, or £100,000 in the last year. I will be asking officers how much of that is actually in Lochaber, and I suspect a fair proportion of it is. So can you just outline to myself and colleagues what further action you will be taking to make sure that the focus that you've had on dealing with these individuals is maintained, and that we still have robust action and deterrent to any individual or groups of individuals believing that they can behave without responsibility in an antisocial way that is detrimental to not just the Fort William community, but Lochaber as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. I understand the impact that antisocial behaviour has on our communities, and as a police officer, but also as a resident within this community, it's important to me that it is dealt with. We will always deal with instances of antisocial behaviour robustly. The team know that. To me, it's imperative that we work in partnership with other agencies and organisations. The police have a massive responsibility here, but so do our other partners as well. And my expectation is that our partners are working with us in that respect. And we do have a lot of joint working ongoing with social work and with Lochaber High School, with Highland Council in the education department. So there is that partnership working ongoing. We do have patrol matrices, which we have the key areas in and around Lochaber. So we've got Fort William High Street, we've got Cool, we've got the Unaird area, Claggan areas, which are probably susceptible to antisocial behaviour. We have spreadsheets at work which are kept in the system that is accessible for all sergeants and police officers to update when they're patrolling these areas. I would love to see police officers out on foot, in pairs, in high visibility vests, walking about. Our biggest probably hurdle is our resourcing to be able to do that. If we've got officers out, we have 2 teams working for a period of 6 hours on a Friday and a Saturday night between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. in the morning, which is a key time for antisocial behaviour. When we have both of those teams out, officers know that I want them out on foot and patrolling those areas if they're not dealing with other priority calls. We also have an antisocial behaviour operation, which is ongoing throughout the year, but it will in times during the school holidays, particularly summer holidays, and then Easter and Christmas. That's the times that we generally put a wee bit more focus on that operation, just to ensure that our officers are in the right place at the right time to tackle issues. If we have resource for it, we will have officers out in plainclothes, in a plainclothes car. We've also got support from our CID department, and they're very good at backing us up. They'll come out as well and they'll patrol in unmarked cars. We can put bids in for additional support from our OSU officers who are based in Inverness, and also we have Davru, so that's the teams that sort of will go out and deal with drugs incidents or antisocial behaviour, and we can put bids for them to come down here if we are experiencing issues. We won't always get them, but we do have that option. We also have the Community Alcohol Partnership, which it runs in lots of areas. It has been set up here, established here. Unfortunately, it's fallen by the wayside a wee bit recently, but we were having regular partnership meetings and we get a lot of support from the CAP themselves. I've had a recent meeting with Graham Clark from the CAP, who's unfortunately retiring, but he's handing the reins over to someone else. And the CAP focuses on alcohol-fueled behaviour with young people, so it's all about underage drinking. And we've already done some test purchasing with trading standards from the Highland Council for vape misuse and also alcohol misuse. And I'm really keen that we get that work re-established and we go out and we do the test purchasing. The CAP are great because they can give us a wee bit of funding sometimes, and we're looking at, hoping to get in an event planned with Lochaber High School. It hasn't come off yet just because there's been some change in personnel with the CAP, and there has been a wee bit of instability with regards to my role, and but I'm very much committed and focused to getting the CAP back up and running. So, and also I think working in partnership with our agencies, I think it's really important that there's work done with regards to parents as well. Parents have a massive responsibility besides all the agencies, and then so we rely on social work for a lot of, because they have the direct input with the families. We generally deal with families when we're arresting their child or dealing with their child. And some of the difficulties we have as well is that with regards to young people, previously we could bring them into custody. That very much doesn't happen anymore unless there's no alternative. So, but regarding the way that we deal with incidents, we might not be able to bring people into custody, but it's how we support the families as well, as to making sure that they're fully aware of the system. And although we can't bring people into custody, we can still be very robust in the way that we our reporting mechanisms to the children's reporter and also to the fiscal. So yeah, there is a lot ongoing. I would say that I would love to have people out every night patrolling on the high street and in various areas in Cool and Aird, but we simply don't have the resource to do that. But we're always looking at ways that we can get additional support when it's available. I hope that answers some of your questions. Excellent.
Thank you. Thanks,
It does
Katie.
indeed. Thank you very much.
So go in reference to vaping and antisocial behaviour and the CAP group, are you finding what is the portion of antisocial behaviour that relates back to, say, alcohol and or vaping? Is there an increasing incidence relating to vaping?
We did have a number of incidents reported to us where young people in Fort William were asking people to go and buy them vapes because of the age restrictions. So that was causing some issues. It is difficult to manage it because the vaping is so common and so common practice. So many young people are using vapes just now. But again, that's where we need to be working with our partners, and if we can get out and do the test purchasing and education in high schools as well. And I think the CAP are very good at that. We also have prevention and interventions officers who do go into the school as well. But certainly alcohol is a contributory factor in antisocial behaviour. There is no doubt about it, but that's why the CAP are very much focused on underage drinking. So that's why I think it's a really good group to have operating here, and I just want to try and get it up and running as quickly as possible again, get it back to where it was. So yeah, and what I would say as well is that just in relation to the antisocial behaviour, when the problems were escalating here in Fort William, one of the young people who was responsible for the vast majority of those incidents, because he was dealt with so robustly, he ended up in secure unit. So, and I think because of that, the instances of antisocial behaviour actually reduced as a result of that. So that's how committed we are to working to keep our streets safer for our residents and visitors.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Yeah, Chair, I'd like to just mention, talking about alcohol, could something not be done in supermarkets to make alcohol less accessible? You can literally walk in, I've seen it done. Kids walking in, grab a bottle off a shelf inside a jacket and out the door. That's not an open situation. You know, could something be done there that it's less accessible?
The problem that exists is under the Licensing Scotland Act 2005, any premise that has a premises licence to sell alcohol can have 2 areas of display within the store where alcohol, so they have an operating plan and a layout plan. And the layout plan must show exactly where the areas are that the alcohol is displayed, and there can be an area behind a counter as well. So when a premises displays their alcohol, that's where the license, when the license has been granted, those areas are highlighted there, and the store cannot deviate from that, so they can't decide to change their alcohol display. So yes, there are stores where there are issues because the alcohol might be displayed near the front door, so it's easily accessible. But under the legislation, we can't say to a premises, move your alcohol from there
No,
to there.
I would,
because of their plan.
no, I wasn't suggesting that we could say it directly, but it's maybe in the bigger picture.
Yeah, we do have Sarah Patterson's our licensing sergeant, who again, she's excellent, she's really committed. She looks at the stats with regards to antisocial behaviour. If we have premises where there is an impact that the sale of alcohol is potentially impacting on antisocial behaviour, then that's something that we do. There is a reporting mechanism to the licensing board for the police. But again, there is a huge onus of responsibility on the licensed premises itself and area management, and again, education as well, from the police, but also from other partners as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just quickly, so reference to cuckooing, have there been any instances in the Lochaber area?
No, there are issues with county lines and cuckooing in Inverness, and that's really, well, it's in the media, and it's but there's no intelligence of any county lines in Lochaber just now, and I'm not aware of any instances of cuckooing that have been reported to us, which I'm pleased to say.
Thank you.
But we're always very mindful of the fact that that picture could change.
Thank you. So I think no other questions. So thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for the report. And yes, we will see you again.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you all.
There was a question I asked previously.
We're moving on, John.
Okay.
I think you can.
Yeah.
I've got my email, so I'll be from that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.
Very much. So then, once we finished. So item 4 is the Community Regeneration Fund assessment of applications, and Martin Culbertson is going to join us in the room. So we're being, in terms of this item, we're being asked to consider the application that's been presented and to agree whether to approve, defer, or reject the application. Thank you very much, Martin, for coming in.
Morning.
How are you?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. I'll just very quickly recap the position with your CRF budget before talking about this application. So following the approvals that you made at your August committee, you have just over 600,000 currently in your local area budget for CRF, 600,197 to be precise. There's only one application today, which is unusual. We wouldn't generally tend to bring just one application to committee, but there are some special circumstances with this one. They'd hoped to target the August committee, but there were a number of issues around the project budget. They're changing VAT status and a requirement to obtain additional quotes. So I'm pleased to say that's all been resolved now, and the application is technically eligible and fine to be considered today. And I think just one other thing, it's really important to stress, this application isn't getting any unfair advantage today by being considered in isolation. If you approve this one today, you'll still have sufficient funds in January to approve all the ones that are coming to you in January if you were minded to do so. So if you approve today, that will leave you 550,197 in your budget. The ask in January currently is around £425,000 that's coming in. So even then, that would still leave you with 125,000 approximately remaining in your budget. So just to provide that assurance that it's not getting any unfair advantage today. So if you're happy, Chair, I'll just give a quick recap of the assessment and then happy to take any questions. So the application is for Mallig Community Hub and Shop, and it's for phase 2 of the development of the premises. It's the former Spar shop in Mallig, if you're familiar with that. It's looking to renovate the building and expand into some space that we currently don't use, as a basis for a number of additional community activities. It's a new hub. They're also wanting to put in a small kitchen to use for catering facilities for events that we have. And there are also a number of accessibility improvements to be made to the building. So they're looking to put in accessible toilets and make some wider accessibility improvements. Generally, I've scored the application very highly. It came across that there was a really good demand in Mallig for the services that this group are providing. There was good evidence of recent community consultation and support for the venture. The current space, the current building is at capacity, and it was clear within the application that they've had a lot of interest to make use of this facility, put on extra workshops, extra community sessions, etc. And what's there at the moment is clearly very used, particularly in terms of provision for young people and activities with young people as well. There's no cash match funding in the budget. It is 100% request to you for the grant. However, they have secured some in-kind support from a local architect who's provided pro bono services to them. Overall, the P&L that was provided with this shows that it will really have a positive impact on them, help to make the venture sustainable, and generally just a very positive application. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks for summarising that, Martin. Do we have any questions?
Oh, yes.
Yes, Councillor Saggers.
Yes, I've got the lease. Do you know the length of the lease of the property?
Yes.
Did they?
The current lease technically runs to the end of December 2027, but they have a commitment from the landlord to extend that for a further 5 years beyond December 2027.
Right, so is it a private landlord or a company?
It's a private landlord, I believe.
Right, right. So you're talking about the various money we're giving with the work to be completed by February 2026. Is this still going to be one of the main court clauses in the agreement of giving the money? Because it's rather short on time now.
Because of the nature of the funding that we can give them now, it's different from what they were applying for previously. So there is flexibility on that. They would technically have up to a year to spend the money, and there's no concerns that they would need a year to do this project.
Right. Do they give some sort of idea of income to be able to keep the whole thing going? If we give we're giving for the main thing.
In terms of the P&L that we've provided, there's no really substantial income from this. The primary benefit of the project is social, but the P&L shows that each year currently they're finishing with an annual surplus of around about £2,000. And as the application says, this can only improve that in terms of income that they can charge for renting out the new space for hire if people wish to do so. So very much primarily social in function, this application. They do wash their face and it does appear to be sustainable.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Saggers. Do we have any other questions?
Maybe you're talking about £50,000, and you're going to put a kitchen in.
The overall work is to renovate a space that's currently quite dilapidated at the back of the building. So they're going to put that into a new community space that can be used for a variety of functions. They are putting in a small scale kitchen as well. That's really just intended to allow them to deliver some basic cookery classes and provide basic catering for events that they have at the facility. They're also putting in an accessible toilet, and there's a number of accessibility improvements in terms of the doors in the building, some levelling of the floor as well. They've obtained 2 quotes for this. The £50,000 quote is the cheaper of the 2 quotes as well.
Thank you.
Is that a price or is that a quote?
That's our firm quote.
Firm quote.
It's, I guess all I can say is it's a pledged quote from the local contractor. I know
Two words that dropped from my vocabulary a long time ago was estimate and quote. Because if someone's going to do something, they should be able to give you a price.
From memory, it's down as an actual document that says quote rather than estimate.
Right.
And to be fair to them as well, I'm aware that they have had quite a bit of detailed discussion with this contractor. He's been out to see the property as well, so he's familiar with it. So
yeah, just concerned that if they overrun the 50,000, where do they go then?
Yeah, if they were to, we would have to, I guess, cross that bridge when they come to it. There is the potential to come back to us. However, I guess all I can say is at this stage, it's as firm a quote as you can accept in the circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think just before I ask members what the decision is, just in the process going forwards, you mentioned that I think the January committee, when the remaining projects will be coming to the committee, there will still be an underspend of like £125,000. So what if members have projects that they think or have been approached by members of the community, would there be time for those projects to come forward and be considered at the January committee, and what would the process be?
There's 2 things there. In terms of starting an application from scratch and coming to the January committee, we'd probably have to review that on a case-by-case basis with them to see how much time they would need. However, that £125,000, we have got flexibility after the January committee to still deal with that. You could either deal with that at your subsequent committee again in May, or if was required, you could, if you wish, call a special committee to consider anything as well. If it was a number of applications that wanted to access that additional 125,000, I would be cautious at this stage because of the timelines that are remaining to get things into the January committee. Currently, all the applications are working to a deadline of this coming Friday. So anything starting from scratch, we'd have to review on a case-by-case basis. But there is still flexibility to carry on that remaining 125,000.
And I think you've talked about the process for future, how this is going to work going forwards into the future.
That's right. We're about to launch a new website for the Community Regeneration Fund. It's called Be Connected, and I'll circulate information about that when it's fully accessible to look at. But basically, it's a way that community groups can put their ideas on this website, basically on a map of the area, and allows us to monitor that on a rolling basis to see how those projects are developing. And I think what we would need going forward is to make more use of the area business meetings and come to you to give updates on what's happening. And we would basically present what we feel is shovel ready and sort of seek a decision from you as to what you want to bring forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Martin. So I guess the question for members is, are we happy to approve the application for us today? Agreement? I see some nodding heads. Yeah, I think we have a majority here. So thank you for members to agree.
Thank you, Chair.
This application.
Let them know there's interest, and I will keep in touch with you and update as to what's coming in and what we're looking at for January.
Yep. Thanks very much, Martin.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to, because the next item, which is the short-term net control area, item 5, NAVE, is still currently in another area committee meeting. So where, if members are agreed, we're going to move on to item 6, which is the Fort William Common Good. So it's right on the end of the page. Fort William Common Good Fund, the parking costs. So, and Ross Bartlett has joined us this. So thanks, Ross. I will hand over to you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. This is just to present the common good parking paper from the financial year 24-25. Just to note, the funding is allocated at source for the common good car parks. So what we are doing today is looking to recover the costs that the service has incurred to run the car park. And you can see in 5.1, we've got the table. The gross income was 106,365.20. With the comment for the West End car park, with the common good 55% being 48,750.72. In 6.1 is the 55% of the costs are outlined as 4,249.55 for the common good, which is the costs we're looking to recover. The total costs for running the car park were 7,726. So it's just for members' agreement for the service to recover the costs from the common good fund.
Thank you. And Councillor Baxter has something to say, and then I've got a question as well. Thanks, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you. Normally, I would suggest that a report like this coming to area committee is somewhat pointless, as it's a recharge that we can only but agree to. But on this occasion, I'm glad that it has come, because I would like to know before we agree to this recharge, whether all outstanding works that councillors or trustees of the Common Good Fund have requested from the parking management service have been undertaken and completed. And that includes, I'm sure, the seawall, which Councillor McLennan has asked about on numerous occasions, and I see he's nodding his head and may want to come in afterwards. But there are sections of the car park that are poorly surfaced, and with the winter months now and the lack of lighting, makes it actually quite hazardous once it is dark to maneuver yourself to your car. And I say that as someone who has a season ticket and parks in that car park every day for work, and it is also badly lined in many places. And I am somewhat reluctant, even though it's a modest amount, to agree to a recharge until all of these issues are resolved to the satisfaction of Lochaber councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Before we go back to you, Ross, I'd also just like, I've got a couple of questions following on from Councillor Baxter. So there is going to be a seawall assessment undertaken. So again, perhaps it would be good to, until we know the results of that survey, as Councillor Baxter says, perhaps this needs to be delayed. Also, the amount here, again, I know it's a small amount, but it says for the year 24-25. There is no time frame in that. The Common Good Fund, from remembering what was agreed last year, the Common Good Fund was not formally established until I think it was the beginning of August 2024. So it wasn't established for the whole of the last financial year. So I'm not clear where this amount of 4,249.55 has come from, because the Common Good Fund was not active for the whole of the financial year. So I guess it would be good to have some clarity on that. And we've also, over the last 12-18 months, we've had about 4 meetings. We're still trying to clarify, as Councillor Baxter said, the condition of the car park, the seawall assessment, and also on ongoing management maintenance plans in terms of the Common Good Fund and how the funds are dispersed, because we've been, my understanding is that's not going to happen for a couple of years, even though the fund has built up quite significantly. So therefore, until we have all that information in place, I'm not sure that it's appropriate to be dispersing any money from the Common Good Fund yet. So that was my main points. Anyway, I'll hand back to you, Ross. Thanks. Oh, Councillor McLennan, shall we will, because it may be similar anyway.
Just all like the three things that I am concerned about. One was the seawall, one was the condition of the actual car park tarmac wise. But right at the very start of this, I questioned how did we manage to divide it up at 55-45? You know, I've asked this consistently and I've never had an explanation. We've never had an explanation as to how this was arrived at. It just seemed to be an arbitrary figure that was plucked out there, and it hasn't actually been explained to us how we arrived at that figure. And I'd just like to raise that. I'd like some clarity on how that figure was arrived at.
Thanks, Councillor McLennan. So I think all back to you, Ross. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just running on the hoof. So the seawall process, I'll need to check up on where that's currently sitting at the moment. I know they were that's sitting with I think it was the PDU that were looking to kind of contract out the works, and the same with. I'll need to look at the condition. Obviously, you've got concerns about the condition of the car park and the maintenance in the car park. The costs that we're looking to recover aren't related to the maintenance. It's for the ticket machines and the transaction fees, as highlighted, along with the staff costs for 9 months, which is I think it was May, if I remember correctly, that it was moved over to Common Good. I'm just trying to frantically find the spreadsheet to double check the date that it was picked on.
I think it was I thought it was July, August time, because it came to
no, that would work. Yeah, so it's so April.
So the thing is, in this paper, there's no clarity on what the duration of these charges are relating to. It just says 24-25.
Yes, that's I have noted that. I'm just trying to double check. It should just be the 9 months, because I have referenced the 9 months in the staff costs table in 6.1, but I should have probably been clearer for the duration. I'm just trying to double check the transaction fees, etc., are only for that same period.
Because it's got 3 payment machines at 400 per annum.
Yeah, so the 3 payment machines we pay, there's an annual fee for the payment machines.
We shouldn't be, because the Common Good Fund wasn't active the whole of those 12 months.
Yes, but
consideration.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm trying to double check at the moment. But I was on the hoof because I got 1, 2, 3.
I think this could have been resolved if the chair and vice chair was sent draft papers for area committee papers, but rather than just coming out when they're released, if the chair and vice chair were sent papers, then we would have picked this up.
Yes.
Prior to the papers being sent out. Councillor McLennan. Sorry.
Thanks for indulging me and allowing me to come back in. But right at the start, when we agreed this, if members may recall, I highlighted that within the report it said that the common good was liable for repair costs. Now, I know that ultimately it is a Highland Council liability, this car park, but I did wish to get some clarity that whatever happened going forward, and at the time, there is a crack in that seawall that it's like 2 inches deep. You know, you can see through it quite clearly at the bit that faces down Loch Linney, that there wouldn't be a liability that would basically wipe out the Common Good Fund if it had to be utilised to pay for major repairs. And basically what I wanted to do was protect any fund that was building up in that common good fund, which is for the benefit of the people of Fort William, that there would be no cost to it, because we were basically taking over the liability of a car park with a massive crack in it. And nobody seemed to be able to give us any kind of security that it wouldn't be a liability for the common good fund. So that was another part of one of my requests, that the build up of the fund wouldn't be affected by a piece of infrastructure that was 60 years old and had a fair amount of expenditure is going to be needed in it in the very short term, I would suggest.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor McLennan. I think Councillor Baxter, coming to you, and the amendment I see you've put in the chat.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've put an amendment within the chat, which in essence says that we note the costs incurred, but that we don't approve the recharge until all outstanding matters that have previously been raised by members are resolved. And I say that because when I was re-elected to the council last November, I think one of the first meetings I attended was actually a discussion with the officers about these outstanding matters, and they were outstanding matters then, and Councillor McLennan very eloquently made the point that we needed to resolve these from the point of view of the Common Good Fund, so that we did not have this open-ended liability falling upon the Common Good Fund, which would hold it below the water before it even started in essence, or potentially had that. And whilst I understand what the officer is saying about these costs have been incurred for the management of the car park, I appreciate that, but I do not believe that we should be agreeing to a recharge until officers who have had these issues raised on multiple occasions over the last 12 months actually come back to Lochaber members and say, this is how we resolve each of these issues, this is what's going to be done, this is the timetable for any works that need to be done by the Highland Council, so that that liability does not fall upon the Common Good Fund. And I hope that fellow members will be able to support that amendment.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Baxter. So are you happy to second that, Councillor McLennan?
Yes, if it brings us to a conclusion and gets us the information we crave, yes, I support it.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Grafton.
Thank you. Just in terms of clarity, and this is a suggestion, do we actually need to list the points previously raised?
That's a good point, Councillor Grafton, and maybe if you can, off the top of your head, write those in the chat, then I'm happy for them to be incorporated within the chat.
Thank you. Alistair, I'm assuming this amendment is competent.
Yes, Chair. I would say so. You're not actually refusing to pay. You're just asking for a deferral for further information, with a report to come back with all the information that members have requested. So this would come back to another meeting.
Thank you. Thanks for confirmation on that.
So it would just be for just a list of items that so the officers know what exactly needs to be clarified.
Yeah, Councillor Grafton is typing at great speed. few spelling mistakes, they can be resolved.
There is a spelling mistake in there.
Don't worry about it.
Just put that up. I think that's all the points. If anybody, if I've missed anything, please let me know.
I think just the other thing is just the agreement around ongoing repair and maintenance and management of the common good fund and its assets.
Right.
But, I think those are the main those are the main things for now. Is everyone happy with that?
Can we
So-
get an explanation as to how the 55%, 45% split was arrived at?
Please type that. Okay, John's typing very fast again. Ian is rising. Yep, got that. Okay. So the amendment is that members noted the costs incurred to operate the paid parking scheme and the charge against the Fort William Common Good Fund. Members agreed not to approve this recharge until all outstanding matters about the West End car park previously raised by members are resolved. So I guess the motion, I will raise the motion. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Grafton will second the motion. So we will go to a vote. So we have to, Councillor Baxter, you're looking perplexed.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
It's possibly my my constant face, but I wasn't sure whether that meant that you and Councillor Grafton were opposed to my amendment, and if you weren't, there's no need to move the motion.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm not opposed to the amendment.
No.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Baxter. So are we all in agreement? Do we all agree the amendment? Okay. Thank you. So guess hopefully we'll work to resolve this, and probably a paper will be brought back to the next area committee meeting. Councillor Grafton.
Thank you. Just a quick question. It is connected to the car park. Currently, there is an area at the far end of the West End car park that seems to be mainly used by council staff, people using the building, and some councillors. I use that area myself. Is this going to be formalised? Is that a long-term agreement or not? Which I think is associated with the lining out of the car park itself that needs to be done. Thank you.
I'll need to look at the history on that element. As far as I'm aware, I think they're issued with permits
Right.
for parking down there, I think. But I'll need to look into the history of that. It's not an arrangement I'm familiar with. I know it happens, it's just I'm not familiar with the background to it.
Thank you.
But I can check that out as well.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we concluded that item, and we will return. So that was item 6 concluded. We'll return to item 5, which is the short-term let control area, and Maeve has joined us online, coming from another meeting. Thanks very much for joining us. We have a few recommendations. Well, we're being asked to consider and agree, consider and note the degree of prevalence of short-term lets within Lochaber, and then consider and agree. The Lochaber Area Committee therefore seeks to progress the consideration of a short-term let control area covering all or part of the Lochaber area, and in doing so agree that progressing with consideration of short-term let control area enables communities within the area to participate in that consultation at the appropriate stage. So I will hand over to Maeve. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, and apologies, members, for timing, trying to juggle 2 concurrent area committees this morning. So I appreciate your patience for awaiting this item. So I've got permission to share my slides. So I think it would be very helpful to just run through some of the key principal matters in the report that were presented to members. So if everyone can see that before I commence, just let me know, and then I'll start to go through these slides. Can I just confirm that they're visible?
They are, thank you.
Okay,
Well,
perfect.
they are
Thank
in the
you.
room. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so essentially what I'll commence firstly with is just so that it's on the public record as to what a short-term let control area can and cannot do. So what it basically means in simplest terms is that all changes of use for future dwelling houses to short-term lets will require planning permission. This is essentially conversions of properties that are dwellings at the present time into short-term lets would always require planning permission. If those changes of use are after the short-term let control area comes into force. So it doesn't apply retrospectively to existing short-term lets that are already being used as short-term lets. So this shouldn't be interpreted as a ban. It just means that they will require planning permission, and those planning applications would be considered in accordance with the council's existing policies on them and in accordance with national planning policy on them as well. So this means that what it does not control is existing short-term lets where they didn't require planning permission at the time that that change of use occurred. And it also does not apply to second homes, which are logged separately on the council's council tax register. And it also doesn't apply to purpose-built forms of tourism accommodation, which already require planning permission anyway, because they were proposed as newly erected structures, such as pods and chalets, purpose-built holiday homes, B&Bs and guest houses. So it's quite a specific type of short-term let that it actually applies to. It's where people use existing dwellings and houses as future short-term lets that are within the remit of what a short-term let control area actually is. So members are well aware that we have one short-term let control area at present in Ward 20 in Badenoch and Strathspey. And we use this policy within our current short-term let control area planning policy to decide on whether individual planning applications would be supported or refused. So you'll see the criteria that is currently in use within Ward 20 is that in the instance where it's actually a long-term empty dwelling house, we actually support that being used as a short-term let because it's seen as a positive thing to bring an empty dwelling house back into use. Also in instances where it's located above a commercial unit within a city or town or village centre, again, bringing empty, often and vacant units back into use are seen as things to support. So I would definitely want to stress that this is not should not be interpreted as a ban on short-term lets for that particular reason. So there is a statutory process of designating further short-term let control areas that was followed in the case of Badenoch and Strathspey. So we have to notify and consult with the public and publish a notice of our proposal. We have to specify the area that we would be intending to designate, and we have to provide a statement of reasons as to why we think this is necessary. We then, after that consultation, provide our submission to the Scottish Government for their approval, and following their approval, we would be given notice to proceed, and we then issue a final publication of publicity to notify the public that this would be coming into force, and that's a minimum of 28 days for that final publication and publicity. So the Council's agreed process to consider further short-term let control areas was brought before members in September, so 2 months ago, and this was what was proposed at that time. So there was for area committees to be initially the ones to decide on whether to progress with any introduction of a control area within all or part of their area, and that E&I would take that decision to formally commence the process, which would trigger the consultation. And that after the consultation, E&I, having taken into account the report of that feedback, would decide on whether to continue that process, which means to continue whether to send it to Scottish Government for submission. And then after the Scottish Government have considered it, that final decision to actually put it into place and enact it would again come back to E&I. So it's important for the public and for members to be aware that this is the stage at which the area committee gets to decide on input. As soon as E&I trigger any formal consultation, if they were to vote to do that, any feedback from the consultation would go back to E&I, and any decision from the Scottish Government would go back to E&I. So it's just important that members are aware at the stage that we're at currently. So I've shown in this slide, we're at that first line. We're at the sort of area committee stage to agree on whether this is warranted or justified, and therefore whether to progress, covering all or part of the area. And then the area committee request to E&I means that we would be anticipating the E&I committee in February would be an appropriate stage to tell E&I which area committees sought to continue and which ones did not, and ask for their approval to prepare any evidenced statement of reasons to take forward a short-term let control area in the areas that have indicated they wish to do so. We would then seek to do a public consultation on our evidence and reasons during this sort of time period that I'm showing. And then reviewing those consultation responses means that we would potentially be in place to return to E&I in August. And if we miss that deadline, it could fall into November. And then after that, the timeline gets a bit more fluid because it's in the hands essentially of the Scottish ministers. If they were to provide approval, then we would be looking realistically at this being in force, if all the stages were to be followed here, in approximately 12 to 18 months as of today. So it certainly does take its time, as with any statutory process. So the report in front of members then looks at the evidence specific to Lochaber for what we've been doing and what we're sort of seeing with short-term lets in the Lochaber area. So the timing of this has been quite important because the council, as members are aware, are progressing a new local development plan. As part of this, we have to do a lot of evidence-based research into what we need to do in terms of allocating sufficient housing land. We, in order to do that, need to have an idea of housing need and demand, and councils produce housing and need and demand assessments, usually on a 5-year cycle. We have an appointed consultant doing this with us at the present time, and there's been a lot of analysis ongoing as part of that. So it contains a whole overview of the council's stock profile, of our housing, social housing register and our list. We also look at the adult social care sector and their unique housing needs. We look at the jobs that are being created in Highland and economic projections and see what kind of implications that has for housing as well. So we essentially need to work out existing need and future need and unmet need as well. So there's a whole lot of different packages of work that go into this. But of most relevance to members in this item is this issue of containment and migration patterns. So using the Sazine's property register, we've looked at the last 5 years of housing sales, transactions for sales in the Highlands. So we're talking approximately 18,000 sales. And from that, we're able to work out how contained the 10 distinct housing market areas of Highland actually are. And when we talk about containment, a really high percentage for containment tells me that a really high percentage of people who are purchasing properties in a housing market area were already living in that housing market area. It means that their median income is high enough to borrow a sufficient amount to purchase a property in the area that they're choosing to live in. And what we're seeing in Lochaber is that 61% of property sales transactions for Lochaber properties were purchased by people who live in Highland, and 57% were actually, of that 61, were purchased by people living in Lochaber itself. So it's certainly it's a contained housing market. It functions as a contained housing market area, but it does have a high proportion of sales from outside Highland. So these are from elsewhere in Scotland and elsewhere in the UK, and in some instances further afield than that. So it has roughly the same proportion of empty homes as Highland overall. It does have slightly higher proportions of second homes, and it does have higher proportions of short-term lets, and specifically properties that have been converted into short-term lets than the Highland average. So this table that was part of the report prepared for members in September is presented on the screen to give an indication, really in a snapshot, of how Lochaber is performing relative to other areas of Highland and to Highland itself. So overall, when we look at Lochaber, it is less contained than some of the other housing market areas, but it's somewhere more contained than, for example, Skye and Lochalsh and Sutherland as well, and even in Badenoch and Strathspey. So when we look at what this really means into the detail of it, about 2/3 of the way down that table, you'll see the market entry house price. So for Lochaber, this is slightly higher than Highland, and this is the initial price that properties are put on the market for to attract buyer interest, and that averages out at about 140,000. When we look at the average house price, which is higher up the table, about 1/3 of the way, this is effective demand. So this is what properties are actually selling for. What we tend to see in overheated housing markets or quite challenging housing markets is that there's a significant difference between the market entry house price and what properties are actually selling for. And again, those are higher than the Highland equivalent. So this tells me that Lochaber is slightly less affordable than the Highlands, and also that the sales from out with the Highlands, so other parts of Scotland, other parts of the UK and elsewhere, they have an impact because the affordability of properties is driven by demand. And for example, in instances where high proportions of sales are from outside the area, this means that the median income of other areas allows those purchases to be provided to people who have a higher median income. They're able to access a different level of borrowing, and they're able to, you basically use their buying power that will go further in an area which is less affordable, more affordable than the area that they're living in themselves. So what this is playing out as is that while Lochaber is a contained housing market area, and there's certainly a lot of demand for Lochaber properties from people living in Lochaber, there's also that demand shown in the sales from elsewhere. This does seem to equate, though, as well to the fact that short-term lets have a higher proportion of potential dwellings in the area relative to Highland as a whole. So when we look at your profile of short-term lets, when we've looked at the short-term let license register, this is what we have found for Lochaber. Of the total circa 1,500 properties, so 1,448, the majority have been converted from houses. They weren't purpose-built. So 319 were purpose-built short-term lets. So these are pods, chalets, and other forms of purpose-built tourism accommodation. But the majority, have been converted from dwellings. And this is particularly the case as, I'd say the percentages are relatively similar, but certainly you've got higher numbers in Fort William and Ardnamurchan. But relative to dwellings, we are looking at roughly comparable percentages across the two wards. So there's not a huge difference between the two. When we look at new build completions, so these are houses that were newly completed, and tracked them to see if they've since been registered as short-term lets on the short-term let license register, we're seeing that, again, both wards are very similar. So we're seeing roughly 7% of new houses completed in the last 5 years have been used since as short-term lets on the license register. Now, this 7% is in contrast to Highland, which is about 5%. So again, it is slightly higher than what we're seeing across Highland as a whole. Now, we know that across the Highlands and in Lochaber as well, the council and members have recently approved the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. We know that there's been a targeted investment through that to try and improve housing affordability. There's also a recently approved financial strategy for the housing revenue account, which includes a rent strategy. And we're expecting through the Strategic Housing Investment Plan to see approximately 268 homes, I believe, are shown throughout the Lochaber area. So the council is making ongoing efforts to try and improve affordable housing supply. But when we look then again at the property types that we're seeing used as short-term lets, in most parts of Lochaber, we're looking at detached dwellings that have been converted. There are some areas in red which show that the most common type of short-term let in that particular area would be unconventional accommodation, which, as I've said before, requires planning permission anyway, because it's almost always purpose-built. But in most instances, we are dealing with conversions, and most of those conversions are detached rural properties. When we look at the proportion of dwellings that this equates to, everything that would be dark green is under the Highland average. Everything that's sort of light green is above the Highland average, but still within a reasonable threshold of what we would call a statistically sort of normal range. When we look beyond that into the yellow, the orange and the red, we're getting certainly into higher outliers that are showing quite high rates, up to 23 and up to 29, almost 30% of potential dwellings. So this is again once we've excluded the unconventional accommodation. So we're seeing across Lochaber, again covering both wards, there's that potential for these impacts to be acutely felt. And when we particularly look at Fort William, there does seem to be less, because again there's more properties in the Fort William centre itself. But then we also have looked at where short-term lets are changing the most. So we've had a short-term let licence register since October 2022. This means that from that point, this is the most robust point to measure change from, because before that we simply haven't had that mandatory requirement to licence and register short-term lets. So from October 2022, what we're looking at is that most of the Lochaber area is seeing an increase in the proportion of dwellings that have been used as short-term lets. Some areas are increasing faster than the Highland average, and those are mostly in Fort William. But then the wider rural area around Fort William and much of Lochaber is increasing, but it's increasing slower than the Highland average. And there are some instances as well where there has been a decline. Now, the decline is usually caused by properties being built at a sufficient pace to outpace any conversions to short-term lets. It's generally not caused by many licence holders rescinding their licence. I would stress that it's usually caused by houses being delivered at a sufficient pace. So when we look again then at the areas that are high in that they're sort of out with that 11.5% threshold, and then the areas that are growing the fastest in combination. This is the map I'm showing at present. So there's a very small number of areas that are high and continuing to grow faster than the Highland average. Most areas are either high or they're not yet high, but they're continuing to grow. But it does cover much of, and in fact all of, the area of Lochaber. Now, as well as this, we've also looked at the area place plan and the registered local place plans, and these have been summarised within the report in front of members. So local place plans have a statutory role. The new development plan has an obligation to consider communities' formal aspirations for development in their area. Those that are registered have met the requirements to be registered as valid local place plans, and those are shown on the screen. So in Ardgour, for example, there's been a seeking to prevent change of use to existing homes to full-time holiday lets through the implementation of a short-term let control area. So they've explicitly put that in black and white that they want that form of regulation and control. Kinlochleven has also been explicit in their concern and request to do this. And then Jura and Kintallen have mentioned the number of homes, unoccupied homes, second homes, unoccupied and short-term lets. I have caveated that the number of short-term lets they've estimated has been in somewhat sort of superseded by the analysis that council officers have done as part of this work. But the general view that they've raised is that there is a shortage of housing in the area, and that this is leading to fewer families and young children in the area. The Lochaber area place plan as well, which was approved earlier this year, has a stated priority for housing to limit short-term lets as well. Now, in addition to the registered local place plans, there are additional notified local place plans where development plans team officers have been made aware of other communities' intentions to prepare local place plans and have in some instances received drafts of those, even though they've not yet been registered. We've sought to review those as to what they have said. So Morven is shown there, which has a particular section and paragraph on short-term lets and B&Bs and hotel rooms, and a need to, a vision is certainly to rebalance that housing provision within the area. Spanebridge, Roybridge and Achnacarry have estimated that 10% of housing stock is available for short-term letting. Now, they've not went further as to whether that warrants, or in their view, a short-term let control area. So that's, we can't sort of presume as to whether they would be seeking that. And yet we've received two others, notifications from communities with an intent to prepare an LPP, but we've not yet been provided any details or drafts of those. So the item recommendations that members can see on the report today are that, on balance, the evidence at this time indicates that the further consideration of a short-term let control area would be justified. The evidence certainly leads us to consider that if we were to be preparing a statement of reasons for the public and for the Scottish Government, there's a strong chance that that evidence is seen as justified, and that progressing with it would actually enable those communities in the area to participate in the required consultation that we would have to follow as part of the process. That would be taken at the appropriate stage if E&I were to trigger that, and we would, as I've said, hopefully be at that stage in February to go to E&I at that stage. So while there's undoubtedly a strong tourism industry and strong tourist demand in the area, all of the economic benefits of tourism can be provided by purpose-built tourism accommodation, and certainly we would want to support the tourism industry, into doing that, where, for example, tourism accommodation can be provided without having to involve a loss of something that we're in short supply of in our housing challenge, which is housing stock at this particular time. So on the basis of that, I'm happy to take any questions if members want to open up into questions and debate. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive summary, Maeve, and thank you to yourself and all the officers for all the work that has gone into generating these reports and the data. It's fantastic and very useful to have. So I think, John, Councillor Baxter.
It's not actually a question at the moment, it's contribution, Chair. So if you want to take questions first, I'm delighted you do that. Or do you want to just go into open debate?
Yeah, I'm happy for you to carry on.
Thank you, Chair. And can I echo your words about thanking officers for the amount of work that's gone into this. It's a big piece of work. And I hope that, Chair, that you might give me a little bit more latitude to make a longer contribution today, because I think this is one of the most important reports and decisions that's come to committee members probably this term of office, if not the previous one before, and that it's only right that our residents and communities hear what local councillors have to say. So my contribution may be a little bit longer than normal. I want to start by saying I didn't come into politics to ban things or put up barriers. That's simply not in my political psyche, but there are moments when government, whether national or local, has a responsibility to step in and regulate a situation that's clearly having a detrimental impact on our local communities. And the issue of short-term lets is one of those cases. Over the last decade or so, we've seen an explosion of properties being purchased in Lochaber for use as short-term holiday accommodation. And to be clear, this isn't about local people who have inherited a home from granny or decided to make an additional property purchase and choose to rent it as a holiday let, either as an investment or to bring in a bit of extra income. That is not the problem here. The real issue, in my mind, is property developers and outside companies, people from well beyond Lochaber, beyond the Highlands even, buying up multiple homes in the same area, not because they care about our communities, but because they see a quick tourism trend to profit from. These are not community-based investors. They're not community-minded. Their interest begins and ends simply with a spreadsheet. And we're seeing the consequences everywhere. And I want to highlight two that I'm aware of. So in my own village of Kinlochleven, the population has declined by around 20% since the last census in 2011. On my own street, the house next door to me is now an Airbnb. It's owned by a perfectly pleasant gentleman who resides in Poland, but it was once a family home, a home with 3 young children who all went to our local primary school in the village. That family home has now been taken out of the local housing stock for a considerable amount of time. And that pattern is repeated across Lochaber. And the report gives us some really stark figures. 10% of all potential dwellings in Lochaber are now short-term lets. double the Highland average. 40% of house sales going to buyers from outside the Highlands. 7% of all new builds in the last 5 years having already been converted to short-term lets. Those are extraordinary numbers, and they tell us that the problem is systemic, not anecdotal. I went on to estate agent websites over the weekend, and the market continues to encourage it. You just have to look at some of the sale adverts, and I quote two of them. Situated in the peaceful village of Ardgour, ideal opportunity for first-time buyers or anyone looking for a buy-to-let investment opportunity. Or another in Invergary, ideally suited to a first-time buyer or as an excellent investment in the area's extremely buoyant short and long-term rental market. That is the language of speculation, not sustainability for our communities. And we're now seeing the absurdity of this play out in real life. Last week, I discovered in Inverlochie a small bungalow being converted into 2 units in just one bungalow to purely make it viable as a double holiday let. And another property just down the road from that, bought by a doctor from England for the same purpose, while at the same time I've dealt with a doctor at the Balford Hospital who is forced to live in a camper van on a residential street because there's nowhere affordable for him to rent. And a teacher in one of our schools moving from one lockside lay-by to another throughout the week, living in a camper van because she can't find a permanent home near to her work. If that's not a sign of a system that is broken, I don't know what is. And I know that colleagues would have had people contact them saying that this is anti-tourism. Tourism is vital to Lochaber and the wider Highlands. It supports our jobs, our businesses and local services. But this is about recognising that when something starts to damage the fabric of our communities, we have to act. And it's important to stress, as the report does, that it isn't retrospective. It will not penalise existing locally based operators who are already running a successful business. What it does is ensure that any new short-term lets in the future go through the proper planning process so that we can manage the cumulative impact on housing and on communities. I did, and as I suspect colleagues suspected, consider whether a more targeted community by community approach might be better. For example, separate zones for Kinlochleven, Ardgour and Fort William. But the danger there is that we simply push the problem from one community to another, creating new hotspots rather than solving the issue. And I believe that the Lochaber-wide approach that we are being recommended is far more consistent, fairer, and recognises the interconnectedness of our housing market in Lochaber. So can I conclude by saying this proposal is not about restriction, despite what some might say. It's about restoration. It's about giving our communities a fighting chance to remain living, working, breathing places. Because if our schools close, our GP surgeries can't recruit and our villages become hollowed out, there won't be a community to welcome visitors to in the future. And I think that's something that I think we all, whatever our politics, should be able to support, and I will be backing the recommendation as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. You certainly echoed my thoughts. Councillor Grafton, you had the hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a clarification, I think this is in what is not covered in your list on the presentation. You mentioned B&Bs, guest houses and annexes. I'm curious as to, is there a clear definition of what an annex is? So I'll carry on and then sort of leave it for you to answer the questions. Thank you. I asked that partly because you mentioned again about purpose-built or new build properties. What I think happens in quite a lot of areas is the people living in that area build themselves a new house. Then they move out of their existing house and convert that into a short-term let. So I'm wondering if that confuses the situation in terms of looking at the figures. And an annex also, I know I'm thinking of one specific situation but the person built a garage with a carport between the new house and the old house. Therefore, potentially, does that classify as an annex and is not coming under the short-term let? So just a little bit of clarification in terms of where the boundaries are. I noticed in your first map that the area to the northeast of Invergarry was a block of red, which means that STLs are increasing above the Highland average and still continuing to increase. I actually live in that area. My house is in that little red block. And I think a lot of it is the semi-rural areas. There were several houses that had been farming houses that have since been converted and are used as short-term lets or holiday homes. So maybe there's a danger there in some specific rural areas as well. But I did notice that red block, particularly because I thought, I live there, was on that map. So thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Just to so to clarify on the annexes. So if someone builds a new structure, if they build a new property, they require planning permission. So in the instance you just described, where they've built a new house but then moved out of their existing house into the new one and then converted the old property into a short-term let, at the present time, obviously it requires planning permission to build a new dwelling or a new structure. At the present time, it doesn't require planning permission to convert the old house or any house into a short-term let, unless you're in a short-term let control area. So in the situation you've described, had that happened in Badenoch and Straths Bay after the short-term let control area came into force, then both of those processes would have required permission. But in Lochaber, it's only the new build, the new structure that required it. So on the second point as well, so annexes are basically, some of them can be very large and they can look like a property, but actually if they're tied to a parent dwelling and they're not a separate planning unit, and if you were to sell the property, you would be selling the annex with it, is essentially what an annex is. If it's not part of that, then it's a separate planning unit, separate address, it has a different unique property reference number. So it would be liable to a whole range of other mechanisms such as council tax. You would need to be in discussions with waste as to how waste was being collected from it. But an annex, if it's correctly an annex, would not require that because it's tied to a parent property. Whether it's a self-contained annex at the bottom of the garden, not connected to the house, or whether it's an integral annex, i.e. part of the parent dwelling, it's in some ways there's different planning considerations as to size and how it relates to neighbours. But if it's still an annex, in both instances, it's tied to a parent property. So it's not transferable in and of itself. I hope that kind of clarifies the distinction between the two.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor McLennan.
Suppose I've got not much to add other than I think Andrew successfully carpet bombed the issue, and I share his aspiration to fully support wholeheartedly the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McLennan. I've just got a question related around the consultation process and so initially we will, I'm assuming, be recommending that Lochaber is considered, goes forward in the consideration process, and then there's consultation. So following the consultation, if there are areas within Lochaber that strongly do not want a short-term let control area, and there are areas that do, which, given the fact that that's already been indicated in several local action plan, local place plans, how will the consultation process? How will the process then continue to say potentially, I don't know, potentially reduce a short-term let control area from being the whole of Lochaber into smaller areas that have agreed versus the ones that haven't? How will that process work? Thank you.
Yeah, I can. It's certainly it's a good question. So any consultation on this needs to be very clear, and communicating and demystifying any planning rules and regulations is a complex process. there's going to need to be a really clear message that this doesn't apply retrospectively, and that it's conversions that we're dealing with, because all of that would need to be spelled out to the public. Now, we also need to sort of collect our consultation input in a way that we're able to actually look at whether the business community, residents, and short-term let operators themselves can input their views, but we're able to record where the concerns are, so that if we do see any areas that don't want a short-term let control area, we're able to say, well, actually, was a really high proportion of the input into that particular area actually not residents, it was some other type of interest that we're able to identify, and that's going to require us to really structure it quite clearly. There is an ongoing consultation at the present time into a short-term let control area that's being proposed by Perth and Kinross Council in Highland, Perthshire. So they have a dedicated web platform looking at a map showing the area proposed. They also have a postcode checker so that the public can input their postcode to see if they're able to, identify that their postcode's actually included in this. So all of these are quite accessible platforms that we would certainly be looking at and paying attention to, as to whether, if we were to be launching a consultation, if E&I instruct us to do so, we'd certainly want to make it accessible, because the more we put into any design of a consultation, the more valuable that input will likely be at the other side of it. In an ideal world, you would have public consultation tying up exactly with what empirical evidence would suggest and recommend you do, but that doesn't always happen. So I think, in answer to your question, really, we would like to identify that, what the evidence says, and we can certainly provide a lot of the empirical evidence that has come out through the housing need and demand assessment. And if communities felt as though there was no need for it, or they were strongly against it, but the evidence suggested that actually this is having a systemic impact, then it's up for us as council officers and members to take a decision on balance as to whether we start drawing amended boundaries, or whether we proceed knowing that this could well be having systemic impacts across the area that would likely cause displacement and create, like other members have said, new hotspots if we were to start amending boundaries based on demand rather than evidence.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So also in this process, of course, the final decision is going back to E&I.
Yes.
It's not coming back to each local area committee. So I guess my question is, before the final decisions go to E&I, I would hope, following the public consultation process, I would hope that it will first come back to area members for proper discussion and input into. Thank you.
Yes, and just to clarify as well on this point, the local place plans that were presented in the report and on the slides today, local place plans themselves have to undergo consultation. So that's a valid requirement for them to actually be registered as local place plans. So many communities may not be entirely surprised by the consultation that could be triggered on this in Lochaber, given that we've seen several local place plans seek that type of intervention for short-term lets, because that priority may well have come from the consultation that was undertaken for the local place plans themselves.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I guess members happy to agree the recommendations in the paper. And I think that looks like a unanimous agreement. So again, thank you very much for the amazing amount of work that has gone into that, and for the, to present the data and to generate that data that shows what is happening out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, members, and apologies again for the clash of timings between two committees.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So we're going back. I think if we'll go back to the next item, which was the item 7, the invitation to pay income, and then after that we'll just have a quick 5-10 minute comfort stop. So handing back to Ross on the invitation to pay income. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Chair. This is it's a very quick paper just to note the members' allocated income, or the committee's allocated income from the invitation to pay car park at West Bay and Mallig. The allocation was 8,593.91, which is the 50% of the net income for the car park. So,
thank you, Ross. I just have a couple of questions that we've got this amount that's coming forward. I think it would be good to have a bit more information about that in regards to the total income. What has the costs? Have costs been deducted from this amount before the net income has been allocated to the area committee? Just I think a bit more clarity on how this figure has been calculated would be very useful. Thank you.
I can provide that for you if you want. So there's 80 bays in that car park. So there's a £53 per bay cost allocated to the car park. There's also, similar with the common good, there's £400 per ticket machine, and there's 2 ticket machines in that car park. And then we have the transaction fees for the year, which were 1,562. So the annualized costs are 5,040 for the car park, excluding the transaction costs. So your maintenance, so your 4,000 ish for the kind of £53 added up. So that's the split. It's £53 a bay for 80 bays, £400 for the two each for the 2 ticket machines, and then the transaction costs.
Okay. So I guess in future reports, it would be very useful if this information was presented as well. And also, so the £53 per bay parking, the maintenance, whatever, what is that money actually used for? Is it used to repair that specific car park?
No, parking services have no revenue or capital maintenance budget. That money goes back into the corporate pot, and it's to allow area roads or lighting or the bins, etc. It's not allocated back to parking services for maintenance.
Right, even though it's right. So it's a cost that comes off per parking bay that doesn't go back into the cost of maintaining the car park, basically. Okay, that's interesting to know. Thank you very much. But yes, so I think certainly more clarity in the future reports would be welcomed by all members. But obviously, it's fantastic to see this money coming back into the local community. Are we happy? I don't think does anyone have any questions? John, Councillor Grafton.
Not a question so much as a point or passing on a message. I know the Community Council at Mallig and some of the residents were very keen that this money went into Mallig. And
it does. That process was, so it's the same process as the ward discretionary funds, and was agreed at area committee last year, and hopefully, yes, so the community does have the ability to access that funding. So I think members are happy to agree the recommendations, and thank you very much for that, Ross, for the report and for joining committee this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks a lot. And I think we'll just have it is now 12:14, so we're just going to have a quick comfort break. I think, what is 5 minutes enough for everyone? Yeah. See you at 12:20. Thank you. I'll just mute us. Moving on to item 8, we have a bereavement services update. And we have John Plain, Bereavement Services Manager, and Richard Robertson, Bereavement Services Project Coordinator, joined us for the meeting. Thank you very much. and thank you for the report, and I'll hand over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Yep, myself and Rachel are just here to give you a quick update on the projects that Bereavement Services are carrying out within the Lochaber area. As you're aware, we are working our way through the capital programme, and our team review burial ground extensions where the current capacity is less than 10 years based on past trends. This information is collated weekly by submissions from local bereavement admin teams. So I'll just take your attention to 6.4 in the report, where it gives an update on the projects within Lochaber. We did have 4 burial grounds within Lochaber that had less than 10 years remaining capacity, but Blair construction works was completed in September to utilise land within the existing burial ground, which has added an extra 130 layers, equating to approximately 22 years additional capacity. So that leaves us with 3 burial grounds with less than the 10 years. As you're aware, Glen Nevis. So work has been going on within the site at Glen Nevis, where the site was cleared of all the tree stumps and roots and all the growth areas there for preparation for drainage works to be carried out this winter. The tender for these drainage works is due to go out the next couple of weeks, with award before Christmas, and looking to get the drainage works to begin just after the Christmas break. Hopefully that will go to plan, and then we'll get our test digs carried out after that, with construction works potentially starting in the springtime. In Kinlochmore, again, we've done investigative work to find a new site. We've identified a site, and we are looking to carry out the trial test digs in the next couple of months as well. And then just finally, we've got Morer, where the adjacent land has been secured and fenced off for future extension. As well as Blair, we also completed works at Durer, which added in additional rows within the current cemetery, giving us another 140 layers, which equates to about 35 years capacity. So the Bereavement Services team will continue to engage with local members on the projects in the area, and ongoing support is appreciated. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And I'm not, again, hang on, I'll see who's, so got Councillor McLennan. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Just delighted to see the extension of Glen Nevis come into fruition, and you think of the pressure we were under about a year, 18 months ago. It's great to see that come into fruition. On page 56, you've got pictures of 2 graveyards, the Durer one and the Blair one. There's just a quick question about Durer. There was some damage with a storm at the gate. I was wondering, is that going to be sorted soon? And I think there's a sort of wrought iron gate that got badly damaged in the storm. And the second one is the Blair. It's absolutely fantastic to see what you've done there, extending that to graveyard, bringing part of it into use. But it was just a quick question about the path. What exactly is that path? Is it hard standing? Is it a gravel? I remember asking a question about that specific graveyard and being told that paths always had to be gravel because it was easier to carry a coffin to the grave, especially in cold and slippy conditions. So I was just curious, what kind of path is that? But it's fantastic to see what's been achieved. But you can just answer them 2 wee questions.
Yep, if you want me to come in there. Regarding the storm damage at Durer, I wasn't aware of that. I'll speak to the local operational team, and I'm sure we'll get that fixed, and I can update you once I've spoken to them. Regarding Blair, yes, the paths, generally all the paths we do now are hard standing. Sort of, they're made with a sort of type 1 with a sort of granite dust generally on top. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. And can I associate myself with the comments made by Councillor McLennan about Glen Nevis, which is indeed good news. But can I ask some questions about the plans for Kinloch Moor? And it's good news that we've got an alternative site now, and to have confirmation that testings are going to be made later this year. But do you anticipate from this stage forward, well, what is the proposed timetable for the new site to be available, and will that, are we confident that that will be within the predicted timescale of the existing site running out of spaces within, well, just over 2 years from now, and has the capital spending for the new site been approved by the management board and thereby the appropriate committee? And can I ask, question to that is, how many layers will be available if this new site comes to fruition, and what lifespan or not lifespan in this circumstances is probably not the right word to use, but the current capacity or the future capacity for this site would be?
I'll just come in again. Yep. Kinloch Moor, timing wise, we've got approximately just under 2.5 years of present capacity there. We are, a lot will hinge on how successful the test digs are, which will be, as I said, getting carried out in the next couple of months. We've got to have them done before March to satisfy SEPA, and then if everything goes to plan, the land sale and then planning falls into that. We do hope to have it. We should have it if the test digs are successful. And again, it kind of, we're looking into a bit of the unknown. But if the test digs are successful and everything goes to plan, we should be okay for the times. But again, we can update once we do have the results from there. But there's just quite a lot of unknowns at this stage. Regarding the size of the potential new cemetery, we don't have the exact size at present, but we do look to have, at least when we're going in to do these new extensions, we look to have cover ourselves for at least 25 years. And again, it's quite a large site we're looking at, so should be a good bit bigger than that. But at the moment, I could just say it's at least 25 years. And sorry, and I missed out there. And the capital spend, yeah, all these extensions are challenging for the budget side of things, but Kinloch Moor, we have got capital spend approved for this cemetery. Thank you.
Councillor Baxter, did you want to come back in?
I did. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. McLean. Obviously, much of this is dependent on whether the test digs are successful and indicate that it's a suitable site. So fingers crossed that that's the case. But what's the plan B if they're not? Are there other alternative sites that have been identified, or do we then have to go back to the drawing board and reconsider what's available in South Lochaber?
Yep. We would have to identify other sites available in South Lochaber. Pretty much at the moment, we're sticking with the site we've got at the moment, and we're hopeful for that. And as I say, once we know, again, just sort of maybe a bit more on the time side of things, that we do the test digs this winter, hopefully all successful, and then we'd look to do the planning and The land purchase and planning sort of through next year, with the construction sort of over the winter, spring, the following year, for it to be ready by, that would be ready sort of tail end of 2027, which would still be way ahead of the capacity running out at present. So
Thank you. Councillor Grafton, did you?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the report. I would like to highlight point 6.3 that you've put on. And it feels as though, as councillors, we've sort of been with this for a while now, in terms of searching for new burial sites and the new legislation that seriously compromises what we can actually make use of. Which sort of leads me into my sort of question. Going down in Ward 11, there are 7 graveyards now closed. There's nothing for Spean Bridge. Some of these communities are growing, Spean Bridge, Roybridge, for instance. And I know there were tests done in the Spean Bridge area for a possible graveyard site for Fort William. But I presume they were negative in that you couldn't actually use that. So in terms of looking at the future, I'm wondering sort of what the provision is going to be for these areas. And another question, Kilman Vague. I asked, I don't know, 2 years ago about the gates on the old cemetery by the church. They have been refixed to the posts, but they're rusting, that they're breaking down, and it seems a shame to let a nice pair of wrought iron gates go if we can get a coat of paint on them. So do you know who's responsible for this? And because it's a closed cemetery, are you not upkeeping that anymore? And if that is the case, then can we actually get some materials and the local community can do the job? Thank you. Oh, it's also a Commonwealth grave site as well. Thank you.
yep, thank you, Councillor Grafton. Just quick one on Kilmavig. Although it's closed, when we say it's closed to new purchasing of layers. We still maintain it, and again, just what I was saying earlier about Jura, we'll speak to the local amenities team and see what we can do to get the gates fixed.
Okay, thank you.
And your point regarding, following on from 6.3 in the report about the challenges we face, without digging back, and I'm sure it was pushing on near 50 sites we were looking at within Lochaber when we were trying to get a solution for Glen Nevis. And again, it's a problem we have across the whole of the Highlands, but probably especially in Lochaber due to the ground conditions. But where possible, and we do investigate all opportunities, but and if there is any, we're open to suggestions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands up, and yeah, so thanks again for the report. It's good to see the progress that's been made, and especially, you know, the extension of Glen Nevis burial ground and the completion, the extra work that's been done on others. So thank you very much for all the hard work that's gone into this, and we'll carry on going into this. Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to item 9, which is the housing management performance report, as we're being asked to note. And we've got Jonathan Henderson and Elaine Wilkinson have joined us. Just sorry, Elaine, I think I can just see you online. Right.
Yeah, that's right. Good morning, members.
Good morning.
Just got me today.
Not a problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will talk you through briefly the housing management report for the last 2 quarters, and obviously the repairs and maintenance is dealt with separately. So I will draw your attention to table 1 initially. It's quite a positive 2 quarters we've had here as well. If you look at the final figure of the total debt, 295,000, whilst it is an increase on last quarter, compared to this time at the end of Q2 last year, we have actually we've had quite a significant drop, which is positive given that we've also had 46 new properties. So the level of money that we're looking to collect in each month is increasing. So the team have been working very hard to protect the housing revenue account and keep the money coming in, which we put many hours into each week, each month to keep that consistent. Across Highlands, we do tend to see in Q2 that there is naturally with the way the rents are collected, there's a slight rise anyway, but we're still sitting for Lochaber below the average for the Highlands, which is again positive, and we'll just keep on chipping away at that month on month. We've got our rent-free weeks coming up towards the end of December, which again then we'll see another drop, just with the rent accounts balancing themselves out at that point. The third table, table 3, you'll see from there they're quite consistent, but there's still a lot of households have got under £500 debt. Partly this is due to the way that universal credit is paid, because they pay in arrears, whereas we're looking for rent in advance. So the team work very hard with tenants on UC to try and get them into a position that they're paying in advance. However, just with the nature of universal credit and the budgets that the tenants are working to, very often it's very minimal payments that are coming in to reduce that down month on month. But again, we signpost to the welfare team or CAB if need be to try and make sure that they're getting the best out of any situation they can financially. And case by case, we do seem to be winning and helping tenants across. Table 4, this reflects the notice of proceedings that we've been issuing primarily. Now again, this quarter we do tend to always put a focus on the proceedings out, just so that we keep the message going that we're not letting things slip in the times of Christmas and the winter season coming in. We just want to make sure that the rent debt remains a priority for people, and make sure they've got all the support they need to try and get them through the tougher months, and that their tenancy stays secure and minimise the risks for them. The good news is we haven't had any evictions. We'll try everything we can to sustain the tenancies, and again we will work up until the 11th hour if you like to make sure that we're not evicting people, that they're getting everything they need, and obviously that's reflected in the fact that we've not had any evictions this year, which we're very pleased with. Table 5 relates to antisocial behaviour across Lochaber. I think I've touched on in the past, historically we often struggle to get people to report antisocial behaviour to us, and we're trying different means to get people to engage with us a little bit more, because we do recognise the impact that it has across communities and how damaging it can be for individuals and for streets and wider community. We are trying all different things. We've got a surgery coming up where people can drop in, so we're trying to make ourselves a lot more approachable, and then hopefully numbers being reported to us, it might increase, but we think it'd be more of a reflection as to what's actually happening out in the communities. For Q8, you'll note that there was 8 cases reported, but there were 0 in Q4. So actually we've identified that there was a problem in our recording of the cases. So actually it has been quite consistent with 3 or 4 cases per quarter new being opened for us. Taking you down to table 6 now, which is regarding the number of homeless presentations that we've had in Lochaber. These again continue to be quite consistent. We've got a team who are very dedicated where possible to ensuring that we're preventing homelessness, that we're not getting as far down the line as there have been homeless presentations. So from 38 in Q1 to 35, which seems to be quite consistent. And again, we're looking at all the different options we can to prevent people getting into the, you know, the roofless situation. And we will look at anything we can to help people in that respect. Table 7, whilst this is reflecting the time spent in temporary accommodation, whilst it looks like there's been quite a large rise in the days in temporary accommodation, in order for us to know how many days somebody spent in temporary accommodation, we need them to get an outcome. So this table reflects that across the Highlands, Lochaber, and particularly in Inverness, where they've got a lot of complex cases, there's been a lot of work done to solve some of the longer standing cases that have perhaps been in temporary accommodation for 2 years, possibly longer. And in that case, we then get the final days that they've spent, and that all feeds into what we've got. In Lochaber generally, our days in temporary are a lot less, just because we don't have the degree of complex cases, and we find them solutions to to permanent outcomes slightly quicker. Again, there's very little change there from the last committee. 1 beds continue to be what we need the most. In Lochaber, we don't have the same stock of 1 beds. We tend to have a lot of 2 beds, which we find ourselves having to put 1 bed needs into, and then often applying for a discretionary housing payment to cover off that 2nd bedroom so that they're not disadvantaged. And Table 9, again, linked into the allocations. You'll see Q1 of this year, we had 65 new tenancies signed up. This ties in with the new builds that we had. And then, of course, sometimes we're moving transfer applicants, so we're then having to backfill the transfer applicants. So Q1 was very busy for our team allocating and getting people into new homes. The new builds are great in that they give us the option of identifying problems within existing tenancies and trying to solve problems in a more roundabout way, and it's been a big success. I think the last point, 9.3, is just that the local housing team continue to be focused on achieving outcomes for households in the greatest need. We are also working with Lochaber Housing Association. We're working with them quite closely these days. And any new builds that they've got, we've had quite robust discussions about trying to find people who are perhaps hidden that we can reach to get them the best outcomes as well. So that is the whistle-stop tour of our committee paper. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Elaine. And thank you very much. I know I've contacted you a few times when I've been emailed by constituents who are having issues, and thank you very much for all the help and quick responses to my email.
Thank you. Always.
Any questions? Councillor Grafton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Elaine. I've got a couple of questions for you. The antisocial behaviour, this is obviously linked to people who are council tenants. I've had a couple of cases where people in private rented accommodation have been causing antisocial behaviour problems in the local area. Yep. And because of that, they've been moved out by their private landlord and then gone into council accommodation. One particular I thought might have benefited from social services intervention, but there didn't seem to be a pathway to actually get through to somebody who would actually say, right, okay, I'll actually deal with this case. Because I was thinking, in one specific case, social services intervention might have prevented that person coming out of privately rented accommodation and not given us yet another stress on the council accommodation. So that's one question. You might need to come back to me on that. I don't necessarily expect you to answer straight away on that one. Okay. And the homelessness, I notice in your figures, the Q1, the number of Leicester homeless applicants is 37, which has gone up considerably. And I'm wondering what sort of effect that has on waiting lists. and on people, maybe young couples or whatever, waiting for council housing, does that then push them back down the list? And I can't think of a solution myself, but is there anything we can actually do about that situation? Thank you.
Okay, I'll certainly get back to you on the other point with the private landlords as well. We do, just in slight reference to that, we've got an antisocial behaviour sort of specialist, if you like, in Inverness. So we can, if anybody contacts us, we can always push on to them and try and get things moving. So we can look at that for you. In terms of the homeless applicants, the 37 that you're referring to, that was when we had all the new builds. So what we'd quite often do is we would be using the transfer option as well. So anybody that we had, it's almost like just moving the pieces of the jigsaw around, if you like, and we'd be housing some of our homeless, but then there would be the backfill also. Our waiting list has been quite consistent, and we get, again, we always look, every property we get, we look at the waiting list, or the transfer list or the homeless list. So we look at every property and see who is on each list, and we don't always allocate to the homeless list. We will look at the general list and the transfers as well.
Sorry, just another quick question. Sorry, I'd sort of forgotten this one. In terms of housing, again, there seems to be a sort of lack in terms of adapted housing for disabled people. I recently had an issue with a couple in Malek who were really struggling, and he had to stay in the area because of his work. So yeah. I have asked the question, and somebody was actually going to look at it. I think the Lochaber Housing Association has built some disabled access, but the question I asked was, is there a way we can build, or when a property becomes empty, convert it so that it doesn't have to be disabled access, but so that if that is needed for disabled people, it can be adapted really, really quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think partly for my team, that one, and then probably slightly for the development team as well, and repairs. I think when we have anything that we think might work, we certainly work with the voids team to try and make easy wins and future-proofing things a little bit. But yeah, I fully take on board that the adaptations and disabled properties we are lacking. We will look at any property that we think we can make future-proof. We'll look at that as and when it comes up as void. And equally, there's a lot of done through HARFs. So for existing tenants, we'll always work with them to try and make their homes as suitable as man for as long as we can, if the property allows for it. But we do have quite a lot of old stock that doesn't always support what we need for individuals.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McLennan.
Thanks, Elaine, for your report, and I'm content to note it. And like Councillor Willis, I'd like to thank you for the speed that you come back to us with responses when we raised issues with you. There's just one item I was wanting to remind you of, the traveller site on Lochaber side. If we could maybe get a report, but I've had a number of sort of complaints about it, and it's been shared amongst the ward. If you could maybe cascade a report out about what's happening with that site, that would be much appreciated. Thanks.
Yep, I'll pick that up, no problem at all.
Thank you. I think no other questions. I've just got a quick question in terms of the homeless households in terms of presentation. What is the breakdown in terms of urban versus rural? And is it mainly an urban problem issue, or is it more? Yeah, what is the breakdown there, if you know?
I don't know the breakdown off the top of my head. Certainly, I mean, it is a problem that affects some of our more rural areas, and quite often the problem that we face as a homeless team is that our temporary accommodation, that stepping stone into something more secure, will be based in Fort William. So we are looking at other areas when voids come up. Do we need to convert certain properties into temporary accommodation to support more rural areas if something does come? But then we're playing a fine balance that we don't want to have property sat as temporary accommodation that we're not going to be using because then there's not a demand. So we flip a lot of properties as they come. We're always looking to make best use of what we have on the day. But yeah, I'll have to get back to you on the breakdown exactly.
Okay, thank you very much for that. But I can't, no other hands. So yes, report was for noting. Thank you very much for the report and for joining us this afternoon. So thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.
So moving on to item 10, and I will just have to go and get Richard.
Used to have an office with us who would do
Yeah, back in the day.
that. Yeah. Flying on our own.
Yeah.
So item 10 is an update on the Corran Ferry, and Richard has joined us in the room. So thank you very much for the report and for coming over to join us, Richard. I'll hand over to you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chair, members. So this is the update for the Lochaber Committee for the Corran Ferry. Providing members with an update on Corran Ferry Infrastructure Improvement Scheme, the Corran Ferry New Electric Vessel, and the Corran Ferry Service Operations. So we continue attending every committee, every Lochaber committee, which is effectively a quarterly update. We also continue our weekly stakeholder updates for stakeholders and members. And of course, we have a 6-weekly steering group, and we're looking to enhance that at the moment. And of course, we enter a new community engagement phase as we reach the beginning of the Corran Ferry Infrastructure Improvement Scheme construction phase. And colleague Andrew Lochaber is available when we talk about the update for the Corran Ferry Infrastructure Improvement Scheme. Also, colleague Murray Bain is available when we talk about the Corran Ferry New Electric Vessel update. In terms of operations, yeah, I mean, thankfully it's more business as usual, as the report reflects. We now have the Maida Glen cooling service, and we had a press release went out on the 27th of October highlighting that and reminding the public of the restrictions around that because she's a smaller vessel. And indeed, recently that was affected by the increased traffic due to changes with the Isle of Mull ferries. We had some inclement weather with high swell and windy conditions when the Maid came into service. And having just come back from refit with some work done on the ramps, we had some adjustments to do once she was experiencing the wider range of sea conditions. Obviously, we had trialed her when she came back in milder conditions. So thankfully, those are now resolved as well. So it is, as I say, business as usual, albeit queues are busy because she's a smaller boat. So the report gave us the opportunity to highlight a couple of good news items, one being the flip boat. So I'm pleased to say the new going well. So that's a real boost, and we're very grateful for the funding sources for making that happen, including the Coastal Communities funding, for which we're very grateful. And also the slipway repairs that we did recently highlighted in the report, they also went well, and everybody, all passengers are getting the benefit of nice, smooth and safe surface on the Corran side. And The other item was the marshal, two marshals this year. So we completed that. It was a seasonal trial and it did go well. But of course, we've actually, I can confirm that we've brought them back on a trial basis again, focused on the busy parts of the week, because of the reasons that I described earlier, with the Mary Glencoe being a smaller vessel in it. Despite being well into November now, it's still very busy. So that's those are the items I wanted to draw your attention to or highlight in presenting the report, and obviously welcome any questions, but perhaps first I should then draw your focus to the appendix, which is the update for the Corran Ferry Infrastructure Improvement Scheme and the Corran Ferry New Electric Vessel. And it is very well laid out, and there's a lot of information in there. So rather than asking Andrew and Murray to, effectively read out the report, I think we're all available to answer questions on either the Infrastructure Improvement Scheme, the New Electric Vessel, or Corran Ferry Operations. Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard. And I see Murray is now online, so, and Andrew's online too. So thanks both for joining us. Do members have any questions? Councillor Baxter.
I have a number of questions and a couple of observations. First of all, Mr. Porteous, dealing with the marshalling trial, which I think by and large was a good project and welcomed by the communities. Can I give you some feedback from some community representatives, but particularly on the marshalling on the Corran side, so the Nether Lochaber side, that in future it would be helpful if the marshals there could be more proactive about working at the top of the slipway closest to the A82 rather than just dealing with the head of the traffic by the slipway and near the public toilets, because quite often the problem is occurring as people come off the A82, particularly if it's queued back to that point, and they can't necessarily see that there's an issue when they're stood down at their little marshalling cabin. So I think it would be beneficial if we're going to pursue this for next season, that some work is undertaken with whoever's marshalling at that time, that they're also at the back of the queue rather than at the front of the queue as well. And I also have a number of questions that I'd like answers for. First of all, can I refer you to the minutes of our last meeting that appear on page 79 of today's reports? And the first bullet point on page 79 says it was queried why the ferry service budget information in the report had not been included in budget papers to the council budget meeting in March 2025, when it was proposed to increase ferry fares and introduce a foot passenger fare. Information on this would be provided to the committee. I'm not aware, unless I've missed it, that information has indeed been provided to this committee. And likewise, further on down within that same section, there is reference made to consideration being given to introducing a road traffic order on the Corran side of the Corran ferry. So my question is, when can we expect that information previously requested and that it would be indicated provided to the committee? And secondly, what progress has there been made in terms of looking at the feasibility of a road traffic order on the slipway on the Corran side? My next question is about the introduction of the foot passenger fares and when they go live. My understanding is that that is imminent. If that has not already happened, that maybe it be live from today or another date this week. Can we have an update on this? I wonder what would happen if I was to go onto the ferry and then go off the other side having not paid the foot passenger fare. What powers do the pursers and other crew on the ferry have to enforce that, and what action would the council take against me or any other individual not paying that fare. And it's been noted that it's been 6 months since the budget was approved, but the foot passenger fares are only actually now coming into operation. So that, where does that leave us with the projected £20,000 income from passenger fares when we are introducing it in November, when it will impact or will only be really charging local residents rather than visitors to the area, which I thought was the whole point of introducing this fare. It's very unlikely now to raise the £20,000, and the cynics amongst us would suggest that that makes it seem that the figure was simply plucked out of the thin air at the last minute as part of the budget planning process to fill a £20,000 gap in the budget. And does that mean that you will be coming back to councillors and asking for an increase because there will be a lack of revenue coming in from this particular source in this financial year? And I suppose that leads me to the next question: is what exactly are the community consultation plans ahead of next year's budget, and when will that commence? And finally, which is very clear from this report that this maybe has been pushed to the side or conveniently forgotten, what has happened to the agreed council policy of further work being undertaken towards a long-term aspiration of a fixed link across the Corran Narrows? After all, a large amount of money was spent on consultants' plans or feasibility studies in the past, and I assume, because since I've been re-elected to this council, I haven't heard any mention of a fixed link across the Corran Narrows, that it is sitting somewhere below the Corran Ferry as we speak.
Thanks, Councillor Baxter. I'll try and address what I can there. Taking them in order. The regarding the point in the minutes from page 79, that is I appreciate that is an outstanding item. So if there's a formal response required there, we'll make sure that that is provided. And apologies if it hasn't been done to date, which I do not think it has. That's number one. Number two, the road traffic order in the marshalling area at Corran is, appreciate where that's coming from. It's a good suggestion. It has been passed to our colleagues in the roads team, so it is sitting with them, but so I have not personally been focusing on that, but I think having spent a short while looking at it when it was raised at the time, it's quite likely that the current road markings around the marshalling area are all, it's purpose designed for the purpose of a marshalling area, and so I think legally the legislation is in place already without having to have a separate addition to the order, but that's something that they're double checking, so we can feed back to you on that one. The foot passenger fare, so that is actually in effect from today, as intimated at the latest media release, and the delay as described in previous updates and releases was due to preparing for that, particularly getting a machine organised, which took longer than we thought on the main vessel, which is now away for refill, obviously. And the 20,000 estimate was as you know, we've been evolving our estimates over the piece over the last 18 months at least. So that was the latest estimate based on the best figures that we had available to us and best estimates, and the evolving nature of local businesses attracting people. It's on a Friday night, that sort of thing. So commencing the fair halfway through the year means that we will realise no more than half of that estimate for this financial year. But obviously, in perpetuity, then we will have an income from that, and we'll obviously have a much more accurate idea what that income is once we start that. Community consultation. So that's a very good point, well made, and as a council, as we look towards next year's budget, we are reminded of that by you, and that's so. Thank you for that. The fixed link. Yes, it's an interesting one because all the efforts have gone into the Corran Ferry infrastructure improvement scheme and the Corran Ferry new electric vessel, and that's now starting to pay dividends. We have the budget, and you know, all thanks to the funders there, and we have the plans, and we're almost in a position to issue the tender for the preferred bidder for the infrastructure scheme. And that is all in order to keep the current service resilient and sustainable over the coming years while we don't have a fixed link. And they were never in competition. In parallel, all this work, as I say, is to keep the ferries running until we have an alternative. And of course, the Highland Council was working with Transport Scotland on that, up to the point where Transport Scotland declined to include it in their STPR2 plans for the next 20 to 30 years, placing other priorities ahead of it, such as completion of dualling of the A9 and rest and be thankful, etc. Yeah, so obviously this is a very pertinent issue to Lochaber, and respect the fact that you've raised it again for all the reasons that we all know about. Thank you.
You, Richard. Murray, see, you've got your hand up. Like to come in.
Yeah, good afternoon, members. No, just regarding Councillor Baxter's question, just to give some reassurance there that, you know, obviously it wasn't included in SDPR 2, but what we also did, the council responded to the Scottish Government's Islands Connectivity Plan as part of that consultation process, and we noted that, you know, there's plans for or discussions about a MAL fixed link, so we're trying to get a response from, you know, to consider the longer term implications for how that would fit in with Corran. So I just dug up my notes there, Councillor Baxter, and I noticed that was about a year ago that we responded to that. So I'm quite happy to follow up on that and just see what actually is their response to the council.
Thank you, Murray. Councillor Baxter, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, and thank you, Murray, for that response. But does that mean, in essence, that the council's taken no further action in the succeeding year on any prospect of a fixed link? And can I just come back and thank Mr. Porteous for his responses? But other than being told I make a good point about community consultation on the budget setting process and engagement with councillors, I actually got no confirmation that there was any intention to do that or what the timescale would be. We're constantly told by senior councillors and officers that we will consult, and we've agreed to consult with local communities, but in reality it actually hasn't happened, and we're a matter of months away from where the administration will be determining their budget, because in reality it will be determined by the beginning of January or soon thereafter once the Scottish budget is confirmed and we know what the local government grant settlement is. But we still haven't actually started a conversation with Lochaber members or communities, and I will reiterate what has been said on numerous occasions, particularly by the community councils on the peninsula, that they are prepared to have a long-term discussion about the fare structure on the ferries, and they've been asking that probably for the best part of 5 years now, and it's never happened. So when is it going to happen?
Richard, over to you.
Yeah, sorry. Perhaps I could commit to coming to. Obviously, we're now into November. I'm trying to think when the next committee is, but I can certainly commit personally to coming to the next ward business meeting. To engage on the subject of, next year's budget. It's obviously the assumption often is that there would be an inflationary increase or not, etc. So that has not been discussed yet, but I can certainly plan to be at the next ward business meeting to keep members and engagement on the front foot on that one, since you've highlighted it today. So I'll commit to doing that as a starter. Sorry, what was the other point again, Councillor Baxley?
I've forgotten myself now.
It's been a long day. Yeah, I'm sorry.
What did you, Murray wants to come in there if you remember, Councillor Murray can remember.
Yeah, I think I remember. Just I think it was relating to the fixed link. So I think it's safe to say,
yes.
Yeah. So the council's got absolutely no money for a fixed link due to upfront investment costs. Far exceed the resources of the Highland Council. So this is now sitting at a national level. So we'll be looking up for any funding for any aspiration for a fixed link. But certainly we've fed back through the Highlands Connectivity Plan. So happy to chase that up to see what the response was. That was just about a year ago, I think.
Thank you for that, Murray. Councillor Cameron wants to come in.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I'm a bit of a new kid on the block, so this has possibly been gone over already, but the Corran Ferry foot passengers, as he said, starts today. Do locals pay the same price? Everybody pays the same. Okay.
Yeah.
And the electric ferry, my concern is that, what's the length of time approximately it will take to build this thing? And will it be out of date before it arrives?
Good questions. I'll let Murray come in though.
Yeah, no, thanks, Richard. No, thanks for your question. So the electric ferry will be part of the small vessels replacement programme. So we're part of phase 2. Usually what happens is the first ferry will take a couple of years to build because there's a bit more in that. And then when you've actually got that template after that, it will be about 18 months to build a ferry. That's the sort of approximate timescale you'll be talking to build this type of ferry. And so we're looking to get it delivered at the end of 2028, early 2029. So the shore power to charge the vessel will come in September 28. We've got a quote that we paid for SSEN, so that's the plan for that. Infrastructure just before that, May 27. So yeah, end of 28, early 29 for the vessel. In terms of being out of date, no, it won't be as very much the latest technology. And we're in a safe pair of hands because we are part of the small vessels replacement programme, which is for 10 vessels. The Corran will be the 11th vessel. So there's the key word here is standardisation across the CHIFS network. So we'll have that standardisation with our infrastructure, and our vessel will also be aligned with the CMOS vessels.
Thank you very much for that, Murray. Councillor McLennan.
I think maybe we should say something. When I think of where we were 3 years ago, from a complete standing start, we inherit like years and decades of inaction. Where we put a ferry in place and make no plans to replace it, and then we find ourselves in the situation where we've got 2 completely comprehensively broken down ferries. I can remember being in the trenches with my ward colleagues and officers. We're hammering home the impacts on everything: tourism, economic, education, health, for the other side of that peninsula. And we end up now where we've got a commitment to put £60 million or and more in between infrastructure and ferries and all the rest of it. You know, I didn't want to finish this meeting with it sounding like a completely nothing had been done. You know, when we compare and contrast where we are today with where we were. And I was totally team diesel. As far as I'm concerned, it should have been a diesel ferry. But there's no funding avenue for a diesel ferry now. It's got to be an electric one, and we are where we are. But I just wanted to sort of put a wee bit of positivity on it. Like, I share Andrew's concerns completely and utterly with the imposition of ferry fares and lack of consultation. But you know, in the last 3 years, there has been a fairly comprehensive battle fought to get this ferry up and running and put a piece of infrastructure in place that's fit for purpose. And we inherit, basically the music stopped and we were the ones that inherited the mess. And I just wanted to put a wee bit of positivity on it, that we have fought hard over the last few years to try and improve the situation, and progress has been made. And even if 200 million or whatever it would cost to put a fixed link in place happened and it was sitting there in front of us today, it would probably be the best part of a decade before we're able to physically drive over it, and a new ferry would be really needed. So we are where we are, and I just wanted to check a wee bit of positivity in there, but I do share Andrew's concerns.
Thank you very much, Councillor McLennan, for highlighting the amount of work that's been done over the last few years. Councillor Grafton.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo Councillor McLennan's statements. It's, yeah, from what I've seen, it is a huge amount of work. A sort of question, point 11, 11.1, the application for the SSE Ensure Power Supply, that seems to be taking quite an amount of time. And I do notice in 11.2 that there are some negotiations or whatever to maybe bring that date forward. In terms of current plans by SSEN, a lot of the energy flowing through our cables is going to be coming from green sources. It's going to be generated by wind turbines, etc. Are we therefore negotiating with SSEN for free power for the boat?
I'll turn to Murray and Andrew for that one, I think.
Or cheap power?
Sorry, I was happy to come in there. I never caught the last bit. Was it something about free power for the boat? I never.
You could answer that one.
I never picked up on that one. Sorry.
Yes, obviously it all depends on. We're currently, well, we have been for some time, but it's definitely a work stream that's live. Is looking at future OPEX costs, and so cost of power from 2029 onwards. We're quite interested in that.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah. Scotland, something like, if you look at Scotland in isolation, it's something like 95% self-sufficient in green energy, which is a tremendous statistic. And there's even possibility of green power being generated by local hydro schemes, which is still not off the table either. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and obviously we're not the only scheme that requires SSEN to deliver in terms of infrastructure, and it's national news at the moment, and there's an immense amount of work that they have to do, and so that's all being resourced as well as prioritised, and we have a fixed date now with them, and we have an accepted quote, which Andrew can probably confirm if he wants to come in now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and members. So the current date we've got is November 2028 from SSEN. So we are in communication with them regarding that date, if that can be improved. However, the delivery of the new vessel, it's unlikely that will come before the provision of the power from SSEN. So we are in communication with them on a quarterly basis just to see where they are with things and if they're improving on that. And as part of the 33 kV network upgrade for Fort William, that's also links in with the ferry, the power for the new ferry at Mull. So obviously that's an added interest from CMAL as well. So that's where we are with it. And in terms of SSEN, they are progressing the advanced works in front of the infrastructure improvement schemes, where they've started their advanced land works, and then later this month it's expected that their subcontractor will come in to remove the subsea cable. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, very good question, John. Yeah, in terms of the community wealth building strategy and developer contributions and all that sort of thing, perhaps free, cheaper connection power for the ferry should certainly be in a discussion point in there. Murray, did you want to come back in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just very briefly, yeah. So when we're having these discussions with SSEN, they're looking at all these vessels coming in, where the infrastructure's coming in. So they're trying to meet these deadlines depending on when the vessel delivery is. So they're very much aware of the estimate for our vessel coming in.
Thanks, Murray. So I think no more questions. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. If you just hang on a minute, got a very short item, and then I'll come out of the room with you. So thanks, Andrew and Murray and Richard for that, and thank you again, as Thomas said. Thank you again for all that amazing hard work that has gone on over the last few years to now get both the infrastructure and the electric ferry project to where they are now. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. The next item is, sorry, I'm just looking at the agenda. We're now on item, we are noting ward discretionary funds, which is item 11. So these are the funds that have projects that have been funded up till now through the ward discretionary funding. And item 12 is the notice of motion, and as I have a conflict of interest and will be leaving the room, I will now hand over to Councillor Grafton to take over, and you can let me know when to come back in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, item 12, I have a notice of motion from the Officer of Legal and Corporate Governance regarding the escaped farm salmon from Gorston Fish Farm, Lochaber. I believe we all have this on our minutes. If anybody wants me to read it out, I'm quite happy to do that. Otherwise, I would open this to the floor for debate. Andrew, Mr. Baxter.
Thank you, Councillor Grafton. So I'd like to give some context as to why I tabled this motion, and that stems from conversations with both wild fishery stakeholders across the Lochaber, concerned residents, and indeed discussions that I've had with Maui representatives. And in tabling the motion, I'm seeking some additional democratic scrutiny, and the aim is not for me to condemn the fish farming industry, because I actually recognise Maui as vital to Lochaber's economy and community. I've seen their operational standards, and I understand the environmental commitments that they have. This is despite my well-recorded previous opposition to expansion at both the Gorston and Lochaber sites, and despite that I maintain a constructive dialogue with them and their staff. But there is no doubting that the events at the beginning of October and Storm Amy itself caused a significant release, 75,000 fish into our loch and river systems. And with climate intensifying, storm frequency and severity will increase, and with that the risk of future significant releases like this will also grow, and our wild salmon populations warrant some serious consideration as a result. Since I tabled this motion and its publication, I have had a further follow-up meeting with Maui, and I would like to share with colleagues some of the key points that came out of my discussions with them. So they have confirmed that the Gorston farm is now fully secured and re-anchored, and they confirmed that there were 75,000 fish released during Storm Amy. They've also confirmed to me that they plan to upgrade to plastic circle pens at Gorston with a new mooring grid, and that requires Highland Council and other regulatory authorisations. And as part of that, there is no biomass increase planned at Gorston or on Loch Linney. In terms of their environmental response to the unintended release of fish, they have been cooperating with the River Lochie Fisheries Association, and they have agreed a 3-year study to look at the impact, and that is being fully funded by Maui in cooperation with fisheries. And they will continue sampling across multiple Lochaber rivers at the various salmon development stages. Maui state that the escaped fish were around about 860 grams each, so they were immature and that they cannot spawn this year, and that they intend to fully publish the results of this study once it is completed. And they have also offered the opportunity for a continued community engagement. They have, Maui staff have offered to meet with both concerned constituents that we may have, and also Lochaber councillors, either in Fort William or an alternative a location. So they are being open in terms of answering the questions that they put, that I've put to them, and in response to this motion that I've put, and I'm pleased that they've done so, and that they've done so in a good faith. I've reflected on Maui's planned infrastructure improvements as a result of this storm event, and I propose amending my own motion somewhat slightly in terms of resolution 3, right at the end of the motion, to remove the section calling for a pause on new or expanded developments on Loch Linney. And the reason, and I'll tell you what I'm proposing first of all. So I'm going to delete from greater resources provided for I'm getting confused myself. I'm the section that starts greater resources be provided for environmental inspection and regulation. I'm actually going to delete from any proposals for new or expanded aquaculture developments in Loch Linney be paused pending a full environmental assessment of cumulative impact. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I'm concerned that if I kept what effective was a moratorium on any future developments in Loch Linney, that would block any beneficial technological upgrades that require planning permission that Maui will put in place as a result of this storm event, and that I'm content that they have given a public commitment that this will not involve any increase in biomass and should be allowed to proceed. I wouldn't want to inadvertently block any resilience improvements that Maui come along with, and that it would be churlish for me to do so, however much I might be skeptical of the aquaculture industry as a whole. I am prepared to accept that they are trying to rectify what has recently happened. I said then that I am skeptical, and I would say that's healthy skepticism of the aquaculture industry. You know, I recognise it's an important part of the Scottish economy. It's an important part of Lochaber life. I do have concerns about its long-term environmental impact in particular areas and the localised impact, and I'm mindful of what Edward Mountain, member of the Scottish Parliament for the Highland, stated over the weekend, that he regrets not pushing harder on his own Rural Affairs Committee recommendation for a moratorium on expansion of the fish farming industry, but I suppose that context matters. But in terms of my own motion, it's seeking, I suppose, to put the public spotlight on what's happened, seek some accountability and transparency from Maui, which they've quite clearly given the indication to me that they are prepared to do. They've fully disclosed the escaped stock, and I'm glad that they've done that. I do think that the industry requires further regulatory enforcement and monitoring of improvements. I do think that maybe not in this case in terms because it was an inadvertent escape, but that the government should bear in mind that Rural Affairs Committee recommendations about a penalty regime and that it needs to be implemented. And I would conclude, Chair, by saying that as Maui have offered a meeting with concerned constituents and members, that I have given an indication that I would be prepared to facilitate that for anyone that's concerned within Lochaber, and that I believe that we can have a constructive engagement with the company, and that would both strengthen environmental protection and enable those individuals to have a further insight into what Maui's practices are locally. So I hope that the motion balances what I believe is legitimate scrutiny, because there was legitimate concerns from our constituents about the impact that this is going to have on local river systems, but it also recognises that Maui is part of Lochaber life, and that they have a willingness to discuss how they improve standards locally with both us as councillors, but also more importantly with our communities.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baxter. That for me was very clear. I understand why you're taking out those 3 lines now, which is really useful. In terms of being a layperson, 75,000 escaped fish sounds like a lot to me. And yeah, you've talked about community consultation, community meetings. I, for one, would be very interested to come along to that meeting and actually gather some more facts and a greater understanding for myself. So yeah, I am also interested in that. Has anybody got any questions or comments? Does anybody feel in any way a different opinion to Councillor Baxter's motion? No. In that case, I have seconded Councillor Baxter's motion. I will say that we have actually passed the motion. Thank you very much. I will guess.
Alistair was wanting to make a contribution now.
Sorry, Alistair, sorry, I missed your hand.
Yeah, it's just in terms of the point 3 of the motion that would need to, it's the letter, the request for the leader of the council to write a letter, and that would need to be a starred item, a recommendation to council. Just to clarify that.
Lovely, that's helpful, thank you. I don't foresee any problems with that. Members okay? Thank you. Let's do it.
Thank you. Moving on to
Just
item-
for record, I said there was that Alistair said that's going to go as a start item.
Moving on to item 13, the minutes of the meeting of the Lochaber committee held on 11th of August included for noting, as were approved at council on the 18th of September. And item 14, which is exclusion of the public, the committee is asked to resolve that under section 50A4 of the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, public should be excluded from the meeting for the following item on grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 6 and 9 of part 1, schedule 7A of the Act. So if members are in agreement, we will now conclude the public session of the area committee meeting. Thank you.